Hello everyone and welcome to spooky season. I'm just reading some more Reddit stories for you guys. So yeah, I hope you like this extra long video. Be sure to follow my Instagram, we have fun over there. Join my Discord, we have fun in there as well. And leave a subscribe, leave a like, comment, all that YouTuber stuff, because it really does help me out a lot. Thank you so much, and let's get straight into these stories. I found a disturbing tape that my wife and her ex-husband filmed on their wedding night. My name's Jose, and I, 49 male, have been married to Kelly, 42 female, for 6 years. We met at Mexico City International Airport in 2014. Both of us were waiting in a bar for a late-night long haul to London. She quickly clocked my black epaulets, each bearing 4 yellow stripes, then swiveled in her bar stool to smile at me. It was an unconvincing smile. I remember that. She looked like she'd been crying. I also remember asking her, "Are you flying somewhere far, far away?" When I revealed my destination, this pretty stranger laughed and said that she would be on my flight. I don't remember much of what I said, truth be told, but I quipped about her not needing to worry because I'd just read Flying for Dummies. I know. I'm not the first captain to make that joke. In all honesty, as scummy as it seems, I wanted to impress this heartbroken wife. She captivated me. After all of these years, I still remember every last thing she said. On the other hand, my words and feelings are fuzzy memories, have been from the get-go. My mother used to say Kelly had put a spell on me. Anyway, without being prompted, the sullen woman told me her story. That she was enjoying a honeymoon in Mexico, but she had booked an early return flight home. Kelly explained that her husband, Michael, wasn't the person he'd purported to be. He was an abuser, a liar. And he's making me tell lies too, she said. He emptied me. That bizarre and unsettling choice of words would ring in my head for the next 10 years. And only one day ago, after I found and watched that cursed tape, did I finally understand what Kelly meant. I think at that airport bar a decade ago, she might have been warning me to stay away from her. I think that had been a glimpse of the real Kelly. But I'm not making sense. Let me explain. It could have ended at the end of that conversation. We could have parted ways. I wish we had. But I was compelled to see Kelly again. I know that's awful. It's not a habit of mine, falling for a married woman. I just felt something indescribable, something I now realize may not have been love at all. I spent a week in London before the return flight to Mexico, so I frequently met up with Kelly at her hotel to check that she was okay. She was too frightened to return to her hometown in Cambridge, as she believed that Michael would find her. Kelly ignored my pleas to report everything to the police, which seemed strange, even at the time. To cut a long story short, we quickly formed a bond, and things didn't end when I returned to Mexico. I visited Kelly every time I flew to England. She moved to Brighton, so I took the train to see her, depending on where I landed. I once took a short-haul flight from Paris to London just to see her. A year later, when our relationship inevitably became something more, I'd already made the decision. I wanted to move to England to be with her. I'd been training to become an airport technician, and I secured a job at Heathrow in late 2015. By early 2017, Kelly and I had bought a house together. In 2018, we got married. I'm obviously fast-forwarding through the ins and outs of our relationship, but Reddit isn't built for essays, is it? I'm here to tell you what I found yesterday morning whilst tidying a storage cupboard. Kelly's clusterfuck of clutter, as I like to call it, came tumbling out of the open door and washed over my feet. A stark reminder that weekends shouldn't be wasted on chores. If I'd been relaxing on the sofa, I might not have discovered what I discovered. Maybe Kelly would have disposed of her own clutter, and we would have lived a happy 50 years together. But I was the one wading through the puddle of forgotten belongings, and what caught my eye during the tumble was a camcorder surfing atop the junk heap, which spilled out of his bag, landed at my feet. I picked it up and chuckled. I knew Kelly and I were old, but not that old. I had no idea she owned such a relic, and curiosity got the better of me, obviously. Who wouldn't want to check the contents of a spouse's dusty tape locked away for who knows how many decades? When I plugged in the device to charge it, an error message displayed on the ancient screen. I thought I'd been thwarted by tape or hardware degradation, but I fixed everything, unfortunately, by cleaning out filth from the tape slot. Then I rewound the recording and pressed the play button. The white pixelated text read 10:09 2014. For Americans, that's September 10th, 2014. And I quickly realized that was a week before I first met my wife. Everything slotted together horribly when Kelly stepped out of a hotel bathroom in wedding lingerie. I realized what kind of tape I'd found. Don't think less of me for watching. It wasn't like that. Even degenerates, I assume, don't want to watch the person they love share such intimacy with someone else, let alone an abusive ex-husband. And Michael was abusive. Kelly wasn't lying about that, but she'd only ever told me fragments of the story. So even though I expected a raunchy sex tape, I wasn't watching for that reason. My eyeballs weren't springing from their cartoon sockets. Well, okay, I was watching the video keenly, but fear rendered me wide-eyed, not lust. I just knew that something was wrong with the hotel room. The only natural thing in the footage was Kelly. And as I watched my wife sprawl across the bed sheets, waiting for her filming husband to join her, I eyed the room's cream-colored walls. I didn't give a rat's rear about interior design, but something hidden in the paint made me sick. You wouldn't understand unless you'd seen the video for yourself. Then something in my head started to ache sharply, much like a migraine brewing behind my sockets. But it wasn't that. It was a painful urge which prompted each of my squeaking eyes to twist. I looked, without even wanting to look, at the edge of the screen. Searched for something that was only just beyond both the border of the video and Kelly's vision. I wanted to scream at the younger version of my wife as she lay still, as she watched Michael with caving dimples and a provocative grin. I wanted to scream at her to run, even though I didn't know why I wanted to do so. That was the most terrifying thing of all. I didn't fear the obvious horror of watching my wife and her ex make love. I feared something else in the room, something I didn't understand. "Get rid of that camera," Kelly whispered, before wagging her index in a come-hither motion. Michael's heavy breathing was not the breathing of a lustful man. It was the labored breathing of something hungry. Hungry in a way that neither food nor sex could satiate. "We need to preserve this moment," Michael said. Kelly rolled her eyes. "Is that right?" In response, the man stopped breathing and my wife's face changed. Her sultry smile morphed into not a frown, but downturned lips. Lips hanging open in the same horrified expression that I must have been wearing whilst watching the tape. Michael hacked, as if bringing up a hairball, then promised, "I'll put it down." He placed the device on the dressing table and walked over to the bed, but Kelly did not thank him. She whimpered and recoiled. Not due to Michael leaving the camera recording. I don't even think she'd noticed its red blinking light. No, my wife was still frightened because she sensed a presence. Not her husband, not the room's seedy atmosphere, not even the claustrophobic nature of the walls. She sensed the same thing that I sensed, though neither of us knew exactly what we sensed. "I'm not in the mood anymore," Kelly whimpered as Michael climbed onto the bed. He hushed her, stroking the backs of his twitching fingers against her trembling cheek. "Don't be like that, darling. It's time to consummate." Then Michael gasped like a punctured tire and shot his head towards the empty corner of the room. He nodded slowly, but neither I nor the recorded version of Kelly saw what he saw. "If I must," he told the empty air. Then came something I still don't know how to explain. The plaster rippled as something behind the wall pressed against it, tried to get out, like a hand forming a shadow puppet. Something about the shape was illusory. It could have been a man, could have been a monster. Its outline rapidly changed from a tall thing with arms and legs to the misshapen blob of indiscernible segments. After less than a second or two of the wall bulging, its plaster flattened again, and the living shape was gone. Kelly screamed in synchronicity with me, but she hadn't even noticed the anomaly. She was staring unblinkingly into her husband's eyes. "What's wrong with your face, Michael?" she cried. What terrified me was that even when the camera caught his face, I didn't see any supernatural change in Kelly's former husband. Didn't see anything other than a very human man. One with an unkind smile and dead eyes, perhaps, but still a man. However, Kelly saw something. Something I didn't. Still, all of that pales in comparison to what happened next. Michael thrust his hand into Kelly's open mouth, prompting her eyes to open just as widely. Her husband's whole forearm plunged into her jaws, muffling her series of screams. Then my wife wriggled and squirmed as Michael propelled his upper arm down her throat, pushed deeper and deeper until his shoulder met her lips. Another impossibility followed, one that I still don't know how to put into words. Michael pulled his arm out of Kelly's mouth, and when his fingers resurfaced, they were holding something. Not my wife's innards. Not the innards I had expected, at least. There wasn't a speck of blood on the man's hand, but a wet, translucent film. It looked a little like either saliva or lubricant. But again, that wasn't what horrified me. Michael's fingers were clutching the hair of a human head, a head sitting at the top of Kelly's throat, like some wretched birthing canal. My wife's lips opened unimaginably wide, as did mine. I gawped in incomprehensible horror. She gawped simply to make room for that adult head to emerge, then gawped wider to free a set of shoulders and a torso. I uttered an entirely silent scream, believing that if I were to produce even the tiniest sound, something from within that footage would hear me in the future. But a slight whimper escaped once I'd identified the head. It was Kelly. A cloned version of Kelly was climbing out of her lips, some fleshy Russian doll. That younger version of my wife was birthing an exact replica of herself. And the clone was screaming too, for it didn't ask to be born. The original Kelly's skin started to crinkle, crease, and shrivel into something smaller. The clone undressed, shed her former skin, reduced the original Kelly to a silky dress that dropped onto the duvet. Then the clone, the new Kelly, fell into Michael's arms, and she eyed the empty skin dress beside her. She may have been screaming through those opened lips, but a white sound was drowning all other noises, a prickly static that dug into my flesh. That maddening racket was accompanied by a gangly shadow moving across the wall of the hotel room's entryway, a shadow with the vague appearance of a man, but the tape cut out before the stranger came into view. Heart on my tongue, I hurriedly thrust the camera back into the bag and tossed it against the back wall of the cupboard. And mere moments later, there came the sound of my wife's car pulling into the driveway, so I tried to compose myself, tried to forget the hellishness I had just seen on her old wedding tape. I looked out of the window at the driveway, but she wasn't in her car, and when I turned back to the kitchen doorway, screamed. There Kelly stood, hounding me with blank eyes and tight lips, with a face horribly white, yet no whiter than usual. I realized I was simply seeing her true self. It had only taken me 10 years to open my eyes. "How did you come indoors so quietly?" I tried to ask, though nothing but a series of hoarse whispers sounded. "Jose," Kelly began, before lifting the camera bag she'd inexplicably acquired. "We were meant to be decluttering, darling. Why would you hold on to this?" I tried to answer, but I was startled by my wife's sudden step towards me, a solitary step, followed by a gasp and a jolt, much like her ex-husband in the video. Then Kelly looked towards an unoccupied corner of the kitchen and said, "If I must." Upon hearing that echo of Michael's haunting words, I ran, barged past my wife, who seemed either unprepared or unbothered by my escape. I ran out of the house, leapt into my car, and drove away from my life. I've been on the road for more than a day, stealing bursts of sleep in service station car parks. It's currently 2 a.m, and I was just awoken by the sound of white noise. Not from a playing videotape, but from the world around me. That static drowned everything for one horrendous minute. I didn't want to look out of my driver's window, but there also came that familiar strain behind my eyes, a coded warning from my brain. And when I sat up to look outside, I locked eyes with a large truck parked a couple of spaces to my right. That was when I yelled until my vocal cords gave out. The side of the vehicle rippled in much the same way as the wall of the hotel room, rippled to form the outline of a man inside the storage compartment. He was pressing against the truck's side, trying to push through the metal. The shape quickly lost its definition, then it became nothing at all. All that remained was an abandoned truck in a near-deserted car park. I didn't know what to do. Please help me before that thing finds me, before it pulls something out of me. I'm stuck in a hospital. Even if I find a way to leave, I'm not sure I should. The last vivid memory I can recall was walking across campus toward my apartment after my morning classes. I remember being in a good mood and had nothing to complain about. The weather was nicer than I would have expected in the middle of October. It was sunny as ever, warm, and calm, save for a light breeze of cool and refreshing air carrying with it the comforting scent of autumn. The sound of crunching leaves was replaced by my boots meeting the concrete beneath them as I took my final steps from the sidewalk into the crosswalk, and then pain. Pain was about all I can remember after that, and it was everywhere. I can't recall what I saw, where I was, or what happened. A few screams filled the air around me, but I couldn't be sure if they were real or if they were a part of some twisted nightmare. I can faintly remember voices here and there. Between the voids of nothingness, I can only assume to be me falling unconscious. What they were talking about is a blur to me. I perceived very little time passing, minutes at most, and for that I am immeasurably grateful. At the time I remember being awake, my entire body was in pure agony. My legs, my arms, my back, you name it. I knew whatever happened to me had done a hell of a lot of damage at the very least. To my surprise, when I had finally woken up, the pain in my body seemed to have subsided. The exception was the pounding headache that accompanied me into consciousness. The incessant buzzing of whatever light fixture must have been on the ceiling agitated me further. Now I could at least tell that I was in what I presumed to be a hospital bed. I let out a grunt as I unsuccessfully attempted to open my eyes in the brightly lit room. I quickly realized I wasn't alone. Upon uttering my grunt, footsteps approached my bedside before the vision through my eyelids was darkened. A cold, fresh towel was gently laid over my face, somewhat quieting the annoying ambient noise of the lights. "There you are, dear. Just relax now." An exceptionally calming, welcoming, and mature voice of a woman whispered to me, something that caught me off guard. I attempted to thank her, though my voice was so dry and coarse that only a sad, incoherent moan. I attempted to thank her, though my voice was so dry and coarse that only a sad, incoherent groan escaped. I heard a few more footsteps move away, and then toward me again, before the woman asked, "Sit up for me, dear, will you?" I did as she asked, while she gently kept the towel applied to my face with her hand so as to not let it fall. A paper cup met my cracked lips and tilted as cold water entered my mouth. The sensation was so blissful it caused me to reach up with my own hands to tilt the cup further, pouring the entirety of water down my throat. I let out a long sigh of relief after the cup had been emptied. "Thank you," I uttered, lowering my head back to the pillow. My throat, though better, still sounded drained and worn as I spoke. The woman gently removed her hand from the towel on my face. I heard her walk away again, the sound of tools or medical equipment being moved following behind her footsteps. A moment later, she returned and gently grabbed my arm at the elbow. "I'll just need a little blood sample, dear. It won't hurt a bit," she told me, raising my limp arm slowly off the bed. "Oh, okay," I replied, hesitant due to the cloud of confusion that still engulfed me, rather than fear. Fear didn't seem like a possible emotion right then. I didn't know a thing about this woman, but her presence commanded trust and comfort. I felt the needle be inserted into my arm, and though it stung a little, it wasn't nearly as bad as I expected. This is when it finally occurred to me that I truly had no idea what was going on. "Wait, where am I? Am I in a hospital? What happened? Who are you?" I asked. The hint of panic in my voice grew with each question. I felt the needle exit my arm, followed by the woman wiping and bandaging it. Her soft touch alone was enough to cease my panic. "Yes, you are in a hospital. You were hit by a driver who was going far too fast through the little crosswalk, it would seem. And I am Dr. Wernick. I've been assigned to care for you until your release," she answered. Her last remark was filled with excitement, a clear indication she felt happy for me being able to leave soon. I felt a bit happy upon hearing such news, though I couldn't tell for sure if that's how I should feel. Being in a hospital in the first place was just as new information. More than anything, I felt tired and annoyed by my damn headache. Feeling a bit more comfortable with my now supposed doctor, I felt inclined to tell her, "Dr. Wernick, I have a raging headache," I managed to squeeze out. "Do you think I could—" "No worries at all, dear," she cut me off. Once again, she had me momentarily sit up before placing a small pill in my hand, which I swallowed, followed by another cup of water. The headaches are to be expected, unfortunately, but if I'm being honest, I believe you're lucky that's the extent of what's wrong with you. Hell, you might be the luckiest patient I've ever seen. When you first came in, you were banged up and bruised pretty bad, but we couldn't find a single broken bone in your body. No organs were damaged, no severe internal bleeding, nothing. Everything seemed to be just fine. Again, I didn't know how I should be processing this. From the way she described it, it sounded as though the incident should have killed me. Before I could ask another question, Dr. Wernick spoke up. "Now, that pill will help with the headache, but it'll make you feel quite drowsy quite quickly. All I need you to do is take a good long sleep. Can you do that for me, William? Her use of my name caught me off guard, but after thinking for a whole 2 seconds, it made sense that the doctor assigned to look after me would be familiar with my name. I simply nodded in response to her question. She let out a light chuckle before remarking, "Good." I heard her footsteps leave my bedside and travel across the room. A light switch was flipped off, ceasing the annoying ambient buzz. A door was open and closed as she stepped out of the room, and I was left alone in the silence. Dr. Wernick wasn't wrong. The meds she gave me put me to sleep within a minute. I hadn't even been given a waking moment to process everything I had just been told, but I didn't mind that much. I slept hard. For how long, I haven't the slightest idea. The first thing I noticed upon awakening was the absence of my headache, and what a relief it was. I must have remained lying still in the hospital bed for half an hour before I decided to remove the now dry towel, sit up, and open my eyes. I half expected my movement to be restricted by some sort of tubes or medical apparatuses, but surprisingly, no. There was no IV, no catheter, and nothing taped to my skin to monitor my heart rate. The only unsurprising thing was the light blue medical gown I donned. I twisted my hips to the side, dangling my legs over the side of the bed and turning to look around the room. I couldn't see anything. I slowly pushed myself off the bed, letting my feet contact the cold, hard floor. Standing up and walking felt especially odd, as if I hadn't done it in a long time, and, well, maybe I hadn't. I carefully stepped in the direction I remembered Dr. Wernick walking when she left the room, arms stretched out in front of me to feel anything I might run into. Eventually, I found a wall and followed it to a door. The handle refused to open. I traced my hands around the door until I finally found a switch, flipping it on with excitement. The sight before me, though familiar at first, seemed to become more uncanny the further I observed. Yes, this was a hospital room of some kind, but not like it should have been. Both old and new at the same time. Old in the sense that almost nothing in there looked like it belonged in this century, save for the box of gloves and hand sanitizer. And new in the sense that it almost felt as though I was the one in the wrong century. The green and white tiled floors, bland stone walls, and monocolored ceiling looked more like the kind you would expect to see in an abandoned building, one full of dust and mold infested with roaches and rats. This room had none of that. Everything looked as new and clean as if it were built yesterday. Even my bed was perceivably of an older design and an extremely minimalist one at that. Other than my bed, the room felt overall empty, even with how small it was. Right beside my bed was a metal table with several medical instruments, the names of which I would never be able to tell you, along with a very modern-looking box of medical gloves and a large bottle of hand sanitizer I had mentioned earlier. Additionally, there was a small prescription bottle of pills, though unlike any prescription bottle I had seen before, this one devoid of any labels or stickers at all. My initial thought was one of concern, though I trusted Dr. Wernick knew what she was doing. Next to the table was a small trash can and a large sink with a faucet, and on its edge sat a stack of paper cups. The opposite wall to my bed had another door, the only other one connected to the room. Not having tried to open this one, I thought I should give it a shot. To my relief, the other side was a small bathroom. Like my room, this bathroom was spotless and equipped with a toilet, sink, and shower. Much like the main room, the bathroom had a few little details that gave away the fact that I hadn't been taken back in time, like the unopened packages of soap bars or the automatic paper towel dispenser. Needless to say, having been asleep in a hospital for an unspecified amount of time, I was in desperate need to relieve myself. After finishing up my business and leaving the bathroom, I paced around my hospital room for a minute or two before coming to another realization. Wasn't there supposed to be a button to push to call a nurse over in case I needed something? And with the lack of heart monitors or anything to indicate if I was alright or not, how would anyone know? This line of internal questioning made me curious about what was on the other side of that door. The first one, the one next to the light switch. The one I knew Dr. Wernick must have left out of. I approached and once again attempted and failed to open it. It was clearly locked, but from the outside. There was no locking mechanism I could control on this side of the door, only a keyhole. After fidgeting with the handle a few more times, I decided to give up for now. though I began to feel a sense of frustration and concern about my situation. I turned back towards my bed and took more than a few steps before the door swung open from behind me, causing me to jump and let out an audible scream out of fright. I turned to see a woman no older than in her late 20s in the doorway. She stood at about 5'4" with an average build and a white, very old-fashioned looking hospital uniform. She had dark hair tied up in a bun and gorgeous green eyes that matched the rest of her looks. She also carried a small rectangular wooden box in her right hand. On that same wrist, she wore a little brown watch. This must be one of the nurses here, I thought. Her immediate reaction to seeing me was to form a warm smile. "There's nothing to be scared of, dear. It's just me," came Dr. Wernick's voice, teasing me for being so jumpy. Once again, I was surprised. I would never have imagined that the mature voice I remembered hearing earlier had come from the woman standing before me. They simply didn't match. "Oh, I'm sorry," I said, stepping back to the hospital bed and taking a seat on the edge. "It's good to see you're up and walking again. Is the headache still there?" she inquired, approaching the metal table and setting down her wooden box. No, actually. It seems to be gone. Thank you," I replied. "That's good, very good. If it ever gets real bad again, go ahead and take one of these pills here. But just one, okay?" she asked, now having put on gloves before opening the wooden box and pulling out a syringe. "Yeah, sure. What's that for?" I failed to hide the slight hint of fear in my voice. "Well, luckily for you, the medication we used to fix you up after that incident worked like a charm. Unfortunately, it does require that we take a new blood sample every 12 hours to monitor its effects and make sure you're all good to go. That's why we need to keep you here for just a couple more days. Does that make sense, dear?" she replied, looking over at me for my affirmation of what she just said. However, something didn't make sense to me. What medications would they have needed to use on me if there was nothing wrong with me in the first place? Or did I get hurt? This answer seemed to contradict what she told me last time. I'm no doctor myself, but it didn't seem responsible to me for a hospital to risk a drug dangerous enough that it needs blood monitoring over days on end to patch up a patient with a little bruising. I could tell Dr. Wernick saw the gears turning in my head because she quickly walked over to me and grabbed my arm. As soon as she did, I let my curiosity go. She knew what she was doing, I thought. What do I know about medicine anyway? I'm sure the blood samples aren't a big deal. After she had finished taking my blood sample, she applied a new bandage. She carefully placed the syringe back into the wooden box and closed the lid, then turned it back to me while she took her gloves off. "All right, dear. I know you're probably a little bored and maybe a little hungry. I'll see what I can do about getting you out of this room and finding you some food. I'll just have to..." She stopped mid-sentence upon gazing at her watch. Her smiley face faded to a serious one momentarily, like a mask that had almost fallen off before she caught it and readjusted it back to her head. She looked at me once more and forced a smile. "I just remembered something," she noted, before quickly turning to the door and speed walking out with her wooden box, adding, "I'll be right back, dear," as she shut the door behind her. I sat for a moment and again pondered what she told me. It still didn't make any sense. What somewhat alarmed me even more was how quickly I wrote off my skepticism. What was I thinking? I should have asked her about that. Why didn't I? I should have pressed her for more information. My thoughts and emotions brewed, causing me to stand up and pace around the room for a second. Why wouldn't she be taking my blood pressure too? Why, if this drug had such negative implications that needed monitoring, wouldn't she have me hooked up to something to monitor my heart rate? My back and forth pacing placed me in front of the door again. I reached out and pulled the handle down, and to my surprise, it moved this time. If Dr. Wernick had intended to lock the door last time, this time she had certainly forgotten. I ceased my pacing and pulled the door open, revealing a long corridor. The interior of this hallway matched my room precisely, with the tiled floors, bland walls, and ceiling with the same old, noisy light fixtures and uncanny cleanliness that tied it all together. My room sat at the end of the hallway. 5 doors occupied each side for a total of 10. Each door was the same, metal, heavy-looking, and light blue in color. They were all spaced evenly and far apart across the long hallway. At the opposite end of the hall was an elevator door, once again breaking the immersion of feeling like I was in a 100-year-old building with how blatantly modern it looked. I pulled the door fully open and stepped out of my room. I knew I probably shouldn't be out here, but with how quickly fed up I had gotten by a lack of sufficient answers and things not making sense in general, I was determined to find out something, anything. Other than the constant ambient noise the lights provided, the noise of my bare feet stepping in the hard floor was the only thing that broke the silence, something that I was hyper aware of as I attempted to move down the hallway as quietly as possible, even keeping my breathing to a minimum to avoid being heard. It took me a while to reach the other end of the hallway at such a slow pace, and it felt even longer. Though once I had reached the end, I didn't know what to do. There was nowhere for me to go in here. I momentarily considered using the elevator. It had both an up and down button, indicating that I wasn't on the lowest floor. I could try going up, I thought, but quickly shot down my idea. I felt somewhat off about leaving my room the way it was. The elevator certainly wasn't going to be the first thing I tried. Instead, I began attempting to open each of the metal doors along the hallway. I stuck to the right side as I moved in the direction of my room. The first three wouldn't budge, but the fourth one did. Before I entered, I turned and scanned the hall, as if waiting for someone to come and stop me. I pulled the door fully open, quickly stepping inside and pulling it quietly shut behind me. This room appeared to be the same size and style as my room, though it didn't appear to have its own bathroom or any other connected rooms as mine did. This room had a single metal table in its center, and its contents made my heart sink upon seeing them. On top of it all were my personal belongings. My backpack, clothes, boots, keys, wallet, and phone all spaced out, as if they were being displayed like a museum attraction. I knew for certain this wasn't a normal hospital procedure. The first thing I grabbed was my phone, which still had a 67% battery and full bars, something that excited and confused me at the same time. I didn't take time to consider it. I needed to act. I ignored the endless list of notifications and immediately swiped to the emergency call menu and dialed 911. After which I impatiently waited, darting my eyes around the room at my belongings, at my phone, and at the door. 911, what is your emergency? I half expected the call to not go through, but I was more than happy that it did. I think I've been kidnapped, I whispered into the phone, immediately aware of how much my speaking had broken the silence of this place. I continued, cutting off the operator before I could hear her next question. I think I was hit by a car. I know something happened. I don't know when, but I woke up in a hospital. But I'm not sure if it is a hospital. There's a woman here claiming to be a doctor. She might be, but she left me locked in a room by myself. She said her name is Dr. Wernick. I don't know what's going on at all. I whispered further into the phone. The pace of my speech was quickened by frightful haste as I continued to speak. As the words escaped my mouth, I reconsidered if calling 911 was the best idea. The more I spoke, the less sense I made, and more importantly, the less it sounded like my situation was an emergency. Then again, I was reminded of the sight in front of me. I had pinched my phone between my cheek and shoulder while I changed out of the hospital gown and into my clothes, throwing the rest of my belongings into my backpack. I need you to calm down, sir. Can you tell me your name? The operator asked. My name is William. Before I could include my last name, I stopped as I heard the line go silent. I stopped lacing my boots for a moment and my heart skipped a beat. What the fuck? What the fuck? I muttered under my breath, which had quickly become increasingly quicker. Was I just abandoned by 911? This couldn't be right. I began to hyperventilate. However, my breathing again ceased for a moment when I heard a few beeps play through the call. I hadn't been hung up on. William, I need you to listen to my instructions very carefully. Can you hear me? The deep, booming voice of a man asked. Yes. Wait, what? Who are you? What happened to the other operator? I questioned. The regular emergency services can't help you, but we can. The situation you're in is beyond your understanding. The woman you know as Dr. Wernick isn't a woman at all. Or a doctor. Not anymore anyway. Do not trust her. Understand? And no matter what, do not let her touch you. The booming voice on the other end commanded. Though his speech was quick, it was also calm and collected. Although the last thing he said sent a shiver down my spine. What happens if she touches me? I asked, knowing full well she'd already done that a few times. We know she's touched you before. Don't panic. Her effects only last as long as her contact with you. What you need to know is that as long as she has a hold of someone, she has power over them. She can make you do whatever she wants. Even your thoughts will bend to her will. Listen, William, I know you can't move much, but I need you to give me an idea of where you are. I quickly exited the room where I had found my belongings and entered the hallway, listening to the operator with one ear and trying to stay vigilant about anything I might hear with the other. I frantically walked around to each door, trying to open all the ones I hadn't tried already. All the while, I tried to explain everything I'd seen to the operator. I woke up in a room at the end of a hallway. There are 10 other doors, and at the other end is an elevator of some sort. I don't know what's up with this place. It looks like, I don't know, an insane asylum from the 30s or something. But it's all clean and new, and to my relief and excitement, the latch on the very last door of the other wall gave way, and I was able to pull it open to reveal a stairwell on the other side. Oh, thank God. I cut myself off, losing focus from my conversation with the operator. Just then, a beeping noise and the sound of something heavy moving was audible to my left. The elevator. The numbers on the screen above it were descending. I ran inside and pulled the metal door shut behind me. William? William? I heard the operator scream. I fumbled my phone in an attempt to raise it back to my ear and dropped it. Upon picking it back up, my shaking fingertips danced around the screen, and to my horror, I saw myself hang up. My phone went silent. No, 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 I mumbled to myself, though I ceased making any noise once I heard the ding of the elevator opening. A pair of clattering voices echoed through the hall and into the stairwell. It's been a slow week. Just spare me this catch. Besides, you seem to have no trouble finding new mice to play with, spoke a man's voice, his demeanor that of a businessman attempting to reach terms for a deal. You've already gotten plenty from me, and of all the ones you could have asked for, this is the one you are most certainly not getting. Dr. Wernick shot back angrily, a tone I hadn't heard from her before. She was fed up with whoever she was talking to. I slowly took one step at a time up the stairs, hoping that their conversation was enough of a distraction. The man's reply was as calm as he was previously. The others are hungry. They are becoming ravenous for a taste. You know as well as I that if we do not meet their demand, they're your responsibility, and I don't want to hear it. I am months away from completing my development. Months. This one here is the most promising yet. The answer is once again no, as it has been for the entirety of this conversation. Dr. Wernick cut the man off, her voice growing in anger by the second. She continued. And one more thing. Convenience stores, apartment buildings, the back of grocery stores, I don't care. Hunt where you want, but stay the hell out of my territory. I had nearly climbed the first flight of stairs by this point, and the conversation had gotten quieter, though I heard Dr. Wernick say one last thing, this time speaking calmly. If I catch you again, well, I think we both know. She followed up with a sinister chuckle as if she had made a lighthearted joke. I felt my blood go cold, but kept moving up the second flight of stairs until I reached the next door, labeled as the first floor. The sight before me came as an immediate relief. I found myself in the halls of a very modern-looking hospital. From the floor to the ceiling, everything looked as you would expect the interior of a hospital to look, how it should look. Even brand new medical equipment was scattered about the way you expect it to be in a busy hospital. The only problem that remained, one that took me a moment of wandering the empty halls to take note of, was that I was still alone. Someone was keeping the lights on, someone had to have swept the floor for it to be as clean as it was, and yet there wasn't a person in sight. No patients, no nurses, no doctors, nobody but me. Though the feeling of being this alone was haunting enough, the worst fear came from knowing that I wasn't. Dr. Wernick was still here, and she had to have discovered my escape by now. The thought provoked me to quickly snatch my phone from my pocket and pick up my pace, moving around each corner as quickly as I could, searching for directions, an exit, or anything that could tell me how to get out. Unfortunately, my headache from before had begun to make its return as well, something I tried to ignore as I kept moving. Between long strides, I opened my phone and redialed 911 in hopes of reaching the same operator. The call was picked up within a second of ringing. "William, are you there?" The same booming voice asked, a surprisingly comforting thing to hear. "Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry, I accidentally hung up and then Dr. Wernick came back. She was talking to some man. They were arguing about something." I spoke. This time a bit louder, yet clearer than last time. I was more concerned with finding a fast exit than anything else at this point. How did you escape? And what man? What did he look like? No, that doesn't matter. Listen, in order to get out, you need to get through the elevator. Take it when you can. I felt frustrated at the operator's instructions. I can't use the fucking elevator. That's where Dr. Wernick and whoever the hell she was with came from. I got lucky enough that they haven't found me yet. All right, William, I understand. Listen. There's no way for you to get out of there without going through the elevator. What the fuck does it even mean? I said, nearly yelling through the phone and cutting the operator off. Listen to me, he commanded back. I rolled my eyes a little but stopped, becoming aware of my stupidity. He continued, I need you to lie low. Stay out of sight if you can. It's a miracle that she left your phone within reach in the first place, but as long as you keep the call connected, we should be able to find your location. We nearly had it last time, but the call wasn't connected for long enough. Once we have it, we'll be sending in 2 teams we have on standby. They're gonna get you out of there. You're gonna be all right, William, and soon. Although I found his last comments hard to believe, I had an instinctual trust in them. I believed him. I rounded another corner, determined to find a good spot far enough away from that hellhole of a basement, far enough that she wouldn't find me. Oh dear, where are you running off to, and who are you talking to? Dr. Wernick's voice came from behind me, almost playfully. I froze in place, my body feeling rigid and cold. I recalled what the operator had told me. I slipped slipped the phone back into my pocket and slowly turned to face her. She stood about 30 feet down the hall, smiling at me, though the intention behind her deceptive face was clear to me now. "Why don't you come back to your room, dear? I brought you some food," she suggested calmly, though my response was nothing but, "What do you want?" She put her hands up defensively as if to try and calm me down. Her facial expression changed to one of serious concern. She took a step forward. The small act of her getting closer seemed to have triggered my headache to become worse. "Dear, I just want—" "Don't fucking call me that," I shouted. She kept her hands up but approached slowly. With each step, my pounding headache became worse. I raised a hand to my head to soothe the pain as much as I could, gripping the handle of a hospital bed in the hallway with the other. William, I think it's time for another pill. You don't look like you feel so good." My fear turned to adrenaline. It might have just been the heat of the moment, but I felt like I had a higher sense of awareness. I could feel the blood running through my body with each heartbeat. I felt my painful moans turn to grunts of suppressed rage. If this was my fight or flight response, it would seem that my body had chosen fight. I raised my vision to meet Wernick's eyesight. "Don't touch me." Though she kept her defensive body language, I saw her facade of a concerned face fade away, and a grin began to crack from the corner of her mouth, something she tried to hold back. She saw my anger, and she liked it. Though it was quiet, I heard the operator yell through the phone in my pocket, "William, what's happening?" She took yet another step closer. I looked down at the hospital bed I had held onto for support the moment before, the one my hand was still attached to. An idea entered my mind. One that felt alien to me, as if it wasn't me who thought it up. Throw it. It made no sense. The hospital bed before me was a modern one, a big one, the weight of which no one on earth could move with ease, much less throw, though at that moment my mind didn't have room for such rational thoughts. I had the urge and I acted. The corners of my vision darkened and all audio sensation seemed to quiet down. I adjusted my grip using both hands this time, lifting the bed above my head in one quick jerk. It wasn't hard. It felt easy and good, if anything. Though Dr. Wernick's figure was nothing more than a blurry silhouette to me now, I threw the bed in her direction with as much might as I could muster. I screamed upon doing so and collapsed to my knees. The bed went crashing down the hall with ferocity, though to my misfortune had narrowly missed Dr. Wernick. My vision and hearing returned to their normal state, just in time to see Dr. Wernick look at the destruction I had just caused, and then back at me with a wide, tooth-filled grin of satisfaction. She continued her approach, no longer feeling the need to keep her defensive stance. I crumbled from my knees to the floor entirely facing up. I began to cry. No, please. I managed to squeeze between sobs. Dr. Wernick now stood directly over me. Now, dear, I think it's time for another pill," she whispered, reaching a hand towards me. The sound of rapid gunfire broke out in the hallway. Dr. Wernick retracted her hand and recoiled in pain, accompanied by a scream. I looked past her to briefly get a look at the group of men dressed in tactical gear, grouped up at the end of the hallway. The sound of bullets meeting flesh filled the air around me. Splashes of black liquid painted the floor in front of my feet, coming from Dr. Wernick's back. Quickly it turned to a puddle. Her stance went from one of being provoked to one of being irritated. After a moment, the gunfire ceased, followed by shouts and the sounds of rifles being reloaded. In the brief few seconds of quiet, Dr. Wernick made eye contact with me before letting out a long, horrifying screech. One that sounded as if it came from 10 voices rather than one. Her eyeballs seemed to burn up, their contents melting to liquid, like wax out of a candle until they were no more. Simultaneously, each one of her pearly white teeth fell out of her mouth, clattering on the floor next to me, some of them landing on me directly. I began to propel myself backward with my feet, distancing myself from Dr. Wernick's body, which had begun to contort. The sounds of tearing flesh and breaking bones accompanied her sudden jerking movements. I don't know how, but her bones seemed to protrude from underneath her now stretched skin, which looked as though it were ready to tear at any moment. Her eyes, hands, and fingers grew longer, almost touching the ground at their full length. She spun around, exposing her now shot-up back. Little remained for clothing and skin. The only thing I could see were the back of her rib bones and her protruding spine. She charged off in the direction of the men while gunfire continued. I scrambled to my feet and ran in the opposite direction. I ran faster than I ever have, and luckily I seemed to keep it going. I rounded corner after corner, getting as far away from the gunfire as I could. Once I felt I was sufficiently far away, I pulled my phone back out. Luckily, my call had not disconnected this time. I continued running, but raised the phone to my ear. "What was that?" I yelled through the phone between heavy breaths. "William, I need you to stay focused. Can you will yourself back to the elevator? I panicked at the question, knowing full well that I had traveled too far in random directions to remember where the stairwell was to the elevator. I have no idea. Ever since I got out of that stairwell... Wait, you climbed? Stairs? Have you been running this whole time? The operator cut me off to ask. Yeah. What about it? I asked, hesitantly, stopping in my tracks. William, that's not possible. I felt my heart skip a beat. What do you mean? I asked back, somewhat agitated. There was a pause, and then a deep breath before he answered my question. The gunfire in the background had now ceased. You were admitted to a hospital near your campus 12 days ago after you were hit by a car. You had over 60 broken bones. Your spinal cord was completely severed, leaving you paralyzed from the waist down. It's not possible that you're walking right now. The operator paused, as if what he just said bewildered even himself. 8 days ago, you were taken from the hospital by that thing that goes by Dr. Warnick. We know because police found CCTV footage of her taking you. After that, we intervened and have been searching for you since. She's been taking people from hospitals in the Midwest for the last 3 years. At least that's our earliest documented case. Of the few victims we've been able to find, you're the first one that's still alive, though now I'm not sure if that's a good thing. The adrenaline rushing through my veins made it almost impossible to stay focused on anything the operator had just told me, though some questions began to formulate. What, William, dear? I had been cut off by Dr. Wernick, who I once again locked eye contact with upon turning towards. Her trashed and tattered uniform, or what was left of it, drooped from the weight of the blood it was now freshly soaked in, though her body, face, teeth, and eyes seemed to have returned to their normal state. A crimson liquid trailed through the hall behind her, where she stood. I tried to make this easy for you, she continued. All you had to do was stay in your room, sleep, and relax. Wait for them to do their work, she said, while eyeing my body up and down. She began to walk towards me on an indirect path. I sidestepped to keep my distance, though my anger and headache had begun to return. I was going to bring you back to the surface once you got better. I was. You're the only one who was a strong enough host, and look at you now. You're all better, thanks to me. I would have brought you back myself, and then you would have been free. No one could ever hurt you again. I hope one day you'll come to see what I've done for you. My headache must have reached its boiling point while I listened to Dr. Wernick's ramblings, because the further she spoke, the darker my vision got, until everything faded to black. After that, I don't recall what happened, save for small snippets of stimulation. I remember more sounds of flesh tearing, of more screams and screeches. I remember the cloud of blackness in my vision receding enough momentarily for me to see the force of something tremendous crack the ground beneath my boots. Mostly, I remember what I felt. I felt euphoria as my fist struck violently, breaking bones, as my hands grabbed a hold of flesh and ripped it apart like meat off a bone. Before it was over, I remember opening my eyes to the sight of Dr. Wernick's body being thrown violently through a glass window into the darkness. I woke up in the ground, covered in a puddle of black liquid that had trickled down and seeped between fresh cracks in the floor beneath my body. I sat up, rubbing my eyes while my headache slowly receded. For the next 10 minutes, I wandered back the way I had previously run in the hallway. That was about how long it took before I heard many pairs of boots accompanied by voices coming my way. I dissociated with the reality in front of me. For all I was concerned, the threat was gone. A couple of the soldiers asked me questions about if I had been hurt or needed medical attention. I gave them short answers, still uninterested. I was more interested in listening to the one standing off to the side, talking to someone through his radio. I picked up some of his conversation. The entirety of Team 1 was KIA by hostile entity. We've secured the target. Should we proceed to the extraction site? The man's face went pale, and his eyes drifted towards me as he received a reply from the other side. He gave some sort of hand signal to the rest of the men, who backed away from me before raising the barrels of their guns in my direction. Again, my memory gets hazy from here. I know I raised my hands and pleaded for my life. All the while, my headache had flared up strong again. I know I heard gunshots all around, and I felt the bullets pierce through my body, but I blacked out even quicker this time. Again, I felt the excitement and pleasure of the destruction I wrought, though the extent of which I'm shielded from remembering. When I came to, I had a fresh coat of dark crimson liquid over the black from Wernick. The men's bodies were in variously sized pieces scattered about the hall. It's been about 12 hours since that last gap in my memory. I've spent that time wandering the halls. I found my cell phone, though it had been smashed to bits in my fight with Wernick. I've searched every door in this place, but haven't found the stairwell. I'm sure I'll find it sooner or later. I remember what the operator said. I needed the elevator to get out of here, though, like the operator, I'm now considering whether that would be for the best. Whatever I am, It's not what I was the day I got hit by that car. Every once in a while, I'll pass by a window, showing the dark emptiness of whatever is outside. They act more like mirrors in this place. I'll stop and stare for a few minutes at a time. Sometimes I'll get a glimpse of the thing that moves under my skin. I'll watch it slither while I think about the same thing over and over. What I did to Wernick, what I did to those men, the sound of their bones shattering, of their flesh being torn apart. If I stare too long, I can sometimes catch a grin forming on the face of my reflection. God help me if I ever do find that elevator. I liked it, and I want more. I'm worried that my hometown doesn't exist. I was born in Sunset Bay, Florida, or at least I thought I was born there. I thought I was raised there, spent 17 and a half years of my life there, went to school there, had my first kiss there, and almost lost my virginity there. But now I can't even be sure. You see, as far as the world seems to be concerned, there is no such place as Sunset Bay, Florida, and there never was. Unfortunately, this story began with Hurricane Milton. As we're all aware by now, Milton was utterly devastating for many fellow Floridians this month, and let me just say that my heart goes out to them all now, well and truly. Luckily for me though, I'd moved out of Florida with my family in 1995, just a few months before I turned 18, and I now reside in British Columbia, here in Canada. Understandably though, when I heard that Milton made landfall in Florida, I was concerned for my hometown. I'd never been incredibly attached to Sunset Bay, and frankly, it's been years since I'd even thought of the place. I have 2 sons and a wife, so there are more important things in my life than reminiscing about my formative years down south. However, when I learned Milton had made a pass around near Big Cypress down by Okeechobee, that got my blood pumping something fierce. You see, Sunset Bay is, or was, or maybe never was, only a handful of miles away. Naturally, I hopped on my computer when I got the chance and did some searching. I looked up Hurricane Milton Sunset Bay. At first, I was relieved to find that I'd come up with 0 results. I figured that meant there hadn't been anything newsworthy there, which could have been good news in and of itself. But I was soon struck by the realization that I wasn't seeing any news about Sunset Bay because the search engine had taken the liberty of assuming I was talking about Sunset Beach down on Treasure Island. So I tried rephrasing. Hurricane Milton, Sunset Bay, Florida, Okeechobee. But nothing. All I got was a handful of irrelevant pages on Sunset Beach, Siesta Key, and even Tampa. I was hit each time with a prompt asking me something like, "Did you mean Hurricane Milton, Sunset Beach?" I found myself, like a real old man, sitting there while verbally beginning to chew out the computer. No, not Sunset Beach, Sunset Bay. I found myself getting so fed up with what I took to be some sort of Abbott and Costello style mix-up that I ended up trying to soothe my seething self by simply typing in Sunset Bay, with the hope that that would get me somewhere. But to my shock and severe annoyance, I found myself yet again redirected to Sunset Beach. For context, Sunset Beach is a whole 5 or so hours from where Sunset Bay should be. They are not the same place in any sense of the word. I found myself seething even further, typing in Sunset Bay into my search bar with every sort of permutation I could think of. Sunset Bay, Florida, Sunset Bay, Florida, Sunset Bay, United States, Sunset Bay, Okeechobee, Florida, United States, but never got a single result. By then, I was livid, but I was also determined to beat the computer, as dumb as that sounds, to get the results I was looking for. Call me stupid, call me stubborn, call the endeavor pointless. I simply wanted it to work once. But it never worked, not even once. Not even a hint of acknowledgement that Sunset Bay ever existed. Not even Google Maps would acknowledge its existence. Trust me, I tried. Eventually, it got to the point where I figured that the only way to get this damn thing working would be to stop looking up Sunset Bay itself and instead look up some specific place in Sunset Bay that may have had some sort of website, maybe online reviews, maybe a blog post. Something, anything. So I took a pause, rolled back from the desk, furrowed my brow, and got to thinking. I tried to think of where the most significant internet-worthy place from back home might be, but the moment the neurons began firing off in my mind, I was struck with pain so intense I could hardly even describe it. I'd imagine it felt like how it would feel if your skull was cleaved apart with an axe, and then boiling pitch was poured into the gaping wound. I screamed my lungs out, grabbed my head with both hands, and came careening down onto the floor, gasping and panting like a drowning man. The world felt like it was going out of focus, but my ear on the ground, I could hear the dull footsteps of my eldest son running into the room, followed shortly by my wife as they hoisted me onto my feet as best they could. They asked me what was wrong and why I had shouted, and I could only respond by telling them it was probably nothing, just a bad headache. Even so, my wife, who has some sort of a sick addiction to those medical channels on YouTube, made me promise to see a doctor because she told me there was something called thunderclap headaches, and they could be a sign of something really dangerous. Before you ask, no, I haven't gone yet, but I'm booked in for next week with my GP. To my relief, it seemed as though as soon as the subject was changed and my mind drifted back from the vague memories of my hometown, I felt good as new again, as though nothing had even happened. I gave my family assurances as best as I could, gave my wife a quick kiss and my son a hug, and placed myself firmly back down in my chair. I was back in the saddle, and I hadn't been bested yet. Piece of shit, I murmured as I slapped the keyboard, looking up to see my wife, hand outstretched with some Tylenol for me, to whom I quickly clarified that the computer was the piece of shit, not her. She gave me a quick, understanding chuckle and left, leaving me alone once again with my new arch nemesis, the computer. However, it only took me a few more failed searches to get utterly fed up, and to hell with it later, I was storming out of the room, throwing in the metaphorical towel. I had better things to do with my time, or so I thought. Because that night, as I lay in bed, I found myself grumbling, huffing, and puffing to myself like a candy-deprived child about the whole debacle. However, the more I ran over the whole situation in my head, the more my frustration began to morph into unease, and the more thoughts like, why the hell couldn't I find anything about Sunset Bay? To, why couldn't I find anything about Sunset Bay? Surely is an abnormal occurrence for a town with a public school, thousands of residents, and several notable businesses to simply disappear, not just from the map, but from the verifiable neo-library of Alexandria that is the internet, right? I couldn't take it anymore. My annoyance had morphed into an overwhelming sense of dread, and I found myself in desperate need of some assurance that this was all some huge mistake. So I went digging, not through the computer this time, but through an old wicker cabinet by the edge of the bed full of keepsakes and mementos. After a few moments of searching, I found what I was looking for: my middle school yearbook from Sunset Bay Public School. An incredibly creative name, trust me, I know. To not wake my wife, I slipped away with the book back into my office, cracked it open across the desk like some sort of ancient scroll, and found my dread quickly turning to terror. There I was. My page was bookmarked, and to my right should have been Brock Tanner, but I found my greasy, pimple-pocked face next to a pale gray square, and beneath, where the name should have been, was an amorphous black sludge, like the ink had been nearly rubbed out with a cloth. A misprint, maybe? I thought so, but I became less and less certain the more laminated pages I turned, finding myself faced with an ocean of gray squares and black smudges, swirling into a blobby mess, like a horrifying Rorschach test, occasionally broken up by a calm, unbothered young face on whom the horror of this whole ordeal was understandably lost. Eyes glued to the page, I found myself fumbling for the landline, dialing the school's phone number as if from muscle memory from all those days playing hooky as a kid. It never even crossed my mind that even if this was some huge misunderstanding, they'd be certainly closed in the dead of night. But the phone rang. It rang, and then it rang again, but a little softer, and softer still. The quivering sounds of the line grew faint and distant, quieter still, as though the phone were being dropped down a bottomless pit, falling away until it was entirely indistinct. I nearly screamed in surprise when, breaking up the dead silence, a robotic voice boomed, crackling and monotone, telling me the call was unable to be completed as dialed before booting me out, leaving me right back where I started, eyes wild, panting in distress, fists clenched on the arms of my chair. Mackenzie, I stammered to myself, in a fervor now, glancing down at the face of Mackenzie Connors, one of the few remaining human buoys in the ocean of nothingness which glared back at me from the page. I went right to the computer, booted it up, and typed in Mackenzie Connors, Sunset Bay, Florida, and to my surprise and delighted relief, I was able to find what seemed to be her LinkedIn page, while having no visible mention of Sunset Bay did mention that she was from Florida. and she looked to be about the right build and age to be her. Once again, I failed to consider that it was the middle of the night and may very well be wherever Mackenzie was now, but I needed this. I needed to hear someone's voice, someone from back home. I didn't even have an excuse for calling. The best I could think of was maybe something about the oddity of the yearbook, but the line connected before I could think of anything better. Hudson Tech Solutions, Mackenzie speaking. How may I help you? Hey, Mackenzie? I asked, the awkwardness of this whole situation beginning to dawn on me. Yes, how may I help you, sir? I apologize if I've got the wrong person here, but did you happen to go to school in Sunset Bay, Florida? Excuse me? I heard her begin before my ears were utterly assaulted by a horrifying, high-pitched scream from the phone speaker, so shrill and intense I worried it would tear the thing to bits, along with the grating sound of shattering glass. Mackenzie? I tried to remain calm, my head beginning to throb through the dullness of the painkillers. Mackenzie, are you okay? No reply. I sat wide-eyed in horror as the line seemed to briefly go dead before I could hear the sound of quiet, murmuring voices and approaching footsteps, as I assume. People began to barge into her room. Hey, Mackenzie, are you all right? One voice asked. Did someone scream? Another timidly inquired. Shit, she's on the ground. She's on the ground, a woman shrieked. Let go of the phone. Let go of the... Another implored feverishly before the line went dead, leaving me in stunned silence with the dial tone buzzing in my ear. I was mortified. I couldn't do anything but set the phone down on the table, not even the receiver, and shuffle, milky-eyed back to the bedroom, whereupon I slid under the covers and shuffled up to my wife, as though by wrapping my arms around her I was trying to confirm to myself that I did exist, and things did make sense. I wish I had more to tell you, but as of now, this is where I'm at. I sincerely hope someone can help me here, because I have not, for the life of me, been able to find any external references to my hometown, and every time I try and think real hard about it, it feels like my head is going to implode, or explode, or shatter into a million pieces. Can someone please help me?